There was a cardboard box sitting on the porch when I got home from my business trip, and the corner of it had gone soft and dark from 3 days of rain. Nobody'd bothered to bring it in from. My reading lamp was sticking out the top, cord wrapped around it the way I always wrapped it, except I hadn't been the one to wrap it. My name is Alina Marsh. I'm 36. I'm a forensic accountant, and this story cost me 4 years of my relationship with my parents, and a sister I used to actually know. If you're the kind of person who likes stories about families and money, and the things people say when they think nobody's counting, stick around, subscribe, and let's get into this one. Because it's a long one, and it earns every minute. I need to back up about 6 months, to the dinner where all of it started, because nothing about that box on the porch makes sense without it. My sister Renata is 2 years younger than me. Growing up, she was the one who cried easily and dreamed big, and always seemed to be standing slightly to the edge of something. A stage, a diving board, a decision, while I stood a few steps back doing the math on whether it was safe. That's not a metaphor. That's just who we were. She lipped, I calculated. She'd been talking for over a year about a wellness brand. Skincare, supplements, the whole vision, mood boards on her laptop she'd show anyone who sat still long enough. She was good at the vision part. Genuinely good. She could describe a bottle of face serum like it was a cathedral. That night, my parents had us both over for dinner, which wasn't unusual, except my mother had made the good lasagna, the one with 3 cheeses, which in our family was basically an announcement that something was coming. My father waited until dessert. He always waited until dessert, like bad or big news went down easier with pie already in your mouth. We've decided, he said, looking mostly at Renata, to help you get Lumen off the ground, properly. Not a loan, an investment, $1 million. Renata made a sound I'd never heard her make before, something between a laugh and a sob, and she grabbed my mother's hands across the table, and for a second I just sat there with my fork halfway to my mouth, doing what I always do, which is run numbers before I run feelings. $1 million. My parents were comfortable, not wealthy. My father had spent 31 years managing a regional supply company. My mother had taught 3rd grade for 28. $1 million was not extra money. It was retirement money. It was the house paid off, kids are fine, we can finally breathe money. I asked gently because I genuinely wanted to understand the structure of it, whether this was coming from savings or if they were leveraging the house. My mother's face changed before my father even answered. Does it matter? We're not asking you to fund it. I'm not asking to fund it, I said. I'm asking if you've thought through the risk. My father set his fork down. You always do this, he said. Somebody in this family gets excited about something, and you show up with a spreadsheet. I didn't say anything else that night. That's a decision I've had a long time to sit with. And I'll be honest with you about it. Some of what happened after was in motion long before that dinner. Because I had spent 30 years being the daughter, who didn't need managing, who didn't need celebrating, who could be handed hard news at Thanksgiving because I handled things well. I had made myself so useful and so steady that when I finally asked one real question, it landed like an attack instead of what it actually was, which was love wearing its work clothes. The actual split happened 3 weeks later, and it wasn't about the money directly. It was about a spare bedroom. I'd been living in my parents' converted garage apartment for about a year at that point, saving aggressively after a divorce that had cost me more than I liked to think about, and paying them modest rent that we'd all quietly agreed made everyone feel better about the arrangement. Renata needed office space to launch Lumen fast. She had a manufacturing deadline, a warehouse deal that needed a business address, and the garage apartment, my apartment, had the separate entrance and the good light she wanted for product photography. My mother brought it up on a Tuesday morning like she was mentioning the weather. We think it makes sense for Renata to use the garage space for a few months. You could stay in your old room. My old room had become my father's home office 6 years earlier. There was no version of stay in your old room that wasn't actually figure it out. I said okay. That's the part that still gets me when I tell this story. I said okay out loud, calmly, because that is what I do. I absorb impact and keep the structure standing. And my parents had spent 36 years learning that they could hand me the heaviest box in the move, and I'd carry it without complaint. I gave myself 2 weeks to find a place. My father helped me load exactly 1 trip of boxes into my car. The rest, the lamp, the reading chair, a few boxes of books, sat on the porch. Because Renata's photography crew needed the space cleared by that Friday, and nobody thought to text me that the rest had been set outside until I got back from a client trip in Ohio and found it soaked through. I stood on that porch a long time, not crying, Just standing there, doing the thing I do, which is take an emotional event and quietly convert it into information. This is what I am worth in cubic heat of urgency, I remember thinking. This is the line item I've become. Lumen launched that spring with real noise behind it. An ad campaign, an influencer partnership, a launch party my parents attended in matching outfits, glowing in every photo Renata posted. I saw it all from a distance, from the one-bedroom apartment I'd found on my own dime across town, because I hadn't asked my parents for a cent of help finding it. Partly out of pride and partly, I'll admit, out of something colder. I wanted them to notice I hadn't needed to ask. I want to be fair to Renata here, because it would be easy to make her the villain of this story, and she wasn't. She called me twice that first month, genuinely confused about why I'd gone quiet. Genuinely hurt that I hadn't come to the launch party. She didn't understand what the garage apartment had cost me, because nobody had told her, because I hadn't told her, because somewhere along the way I'd decided that being wronged quietly was more dignified than being wronged loudly. And quiet wrongs have a way of never actually reaching the person who caused them. I miss you, she said, the second time she called. This doesn't feel like winning if you're not around for it. I told her I was just busy. That was a lie and I knew it while I was saying it. Almost a year went by like that. Polite distance. Holiday dinners where we talked about the weather and her supplement line's new packaging and nothing real. I built my career quietly. I'd moved from a mid-sized accounting firm into forensic work. The kind where companies bring you in after they already suspect something is wrong, but don't yet know what or how bad. It suits the way my brain works. I don't see a balance sheet. I see a story written in numbers, and somewhere in that story is always the sentence nobody wanted to say out loud. Lumen, meanwhile, looked, from the outside, like it was thriving. Renata posted growth numbers, new retail partnerships, a bigger warehouse. My parents talked about her constantly, the way you talk about a horse that's finally winning after years of betting on it. Then, on a Thursday in October, my father called me. He never called first. Usually it was my mother, checking in, asking when I'd visit. His voice on the phone had a flatness to it I didn't recognize, a kind of careful calm that I now know, professionally, is often what people sound like right before they say something they've been avoiding for weeks. Lena, he said. Could you come by? It's about Renata's company. We think we need someone who understands numbers. Not, we need you. Not, we're sorry, could you help us? We need someone who understands numbers. Even in crisis, I was a category before I was a daughter. I noticed that. I filed it under later, the way I'd filed away every hurt in this story, and I said I'd come. What I found, once I sat down with Lumen's books, because Renata, to her credit, once she understood how bad things had gotten, handed me everything without flinching, was not fraud in the dramatic sense people imagine. It was something quieter and, in its way, sadder. A business built on a foundation of borrowed confidence. Renata had reinvested revenue faster than it came in, chasing growth targets that existed mostly to keep the story exciting for retail partners. She'd taken a private loan against future earnings to cover a manufacturing shortfall 8 months earlier, a loan she hadn't told our parents about, hoping to pay it quietly before anyone noticed. She hadn't wanted to disappoint them. She hadn't wanted to be the cautionary tale after they'd bet everything on her. The company was, by the numbers, already gone. It had been gone, functionally, for about 8 months. Renata had just been running very fast on a floor that had already given out beneath her, the way people sometimes do for longer than seems physically possible, right up until the moment gravity remembers them. I sat with that information for 2 full days before I told anyone. Some of that was professional caution, you verify before you speak, but if I'm honest, some of it was something else. Some small, ungenerous part of me sat with those numbers and felt something close to vindication. I told them to ask about the risk. I asked one question at a dinner table, and got called a spreadsheet for it. Here it is. Here's the receipt. I'm not proud of sitting in that feeling as long as I did. It's the flawed part of me in this story. And I want to say it plainly instead of skipping past it. I had real information that could have helped my family sooner, and for 2 days I let an old wound decide the timing of the truth. That's not who I want to be, professionally or otherwise, and recognizing it sitting alone at my kitchen table, with Lumen's ledgers spread out in front of me, was its own kind of reckoning. I finally drove out to my parents' house on a Sunday. Renata was already there when I arrived, sitting at the same table where the $1 million had first been announced over 3 cheese lasagna. Except now there was no lasagna, just cold coffee and a laptop open to numbers I already understood better than anyone else in the room. My mother's hands were shaking, the same kind of small tremor I remembered noticing in someone else in a different story, in a different kitchen, except this time it was fear instead of illness, and this time I didn't file it away. I noticed it and I let myself feel it. Just tell us, my father said. However bad, I looked at Renata first. She looked exhausted in a way I hadn't let myself see over the last year, dark circles, her hands wrapped tightly around her coffee mug like it was the only warm, steady thing left in the room. It's gone, I said. The company can't be saved in its current form. The loan against future earnings means even liquidating what's left won't cover what's owed. I'm sorry. My mother made a small broken sound. My father put his head in his hands, and Renata was the one who spoke next, quietly, not defending herself, not performing grief for the room. I never asked to be the one everyone bet on, she said. I just wanted to try something and have it be allowed to fail small, like a normal person's dream. Nobody ever let me fail small. I never asked to be the one everyone bet on. That sentence has stayed with me since, turning over and over, because it explained something I hadn't let myself see clearly before. And being the golden child, and being the invisible one are two different weights. But they're still both weights. And my sister had been carrying hers the whole time too, just in a different shape than mine. The climax of this story isn't dramatic, and I want to be honest that it isn't, because I know some of you watching are waiting for the moment I finally say something sharp enough to make my parents feel what I felt on that porch a year earlier. That moment doesn't come the way you might want it to. What I actually said, once the numbers were laid out and the crying had mostly stopped, was this: you didn't do anything wrong by believing in her. You did something wrong by deciding, without asking me, that my steadiness meant I didn't need anything back. That's the part I need you to understand, not the money. That. Nobody shouted. My father didn't argue. He just nodded, slowly, the particular nod of a man finally hearing a sentence he's going to carry around for a while. The witness in all this was my Aunt Deb, my mother's sister, who'd been quiet through most of the year, mostly on the phone with my mother, not around the table often. She called me a few days after that Sunday, out of nowhere. I watched you carry things for this family since you were about 9 years old, she said. Nobody ever asked if the box was too heavy. I should have said something a long time ago. I'm saying it now. That's all she said. She didn't make it bigger than it needed to be. But she was the one person who'd apparently been watching the shape of it for years, and would remember it correctly whenever this story came up again, at some future dinner. Here's the plain truth of what happened after, because that's the only way I know how to tell this part. Lumen closed within 2 months. Renata took a salaried marketing job at a company that makes the same kind of products she used to dream of building herself. And some days that seems to sting her and other days it seems to be a relief. And I think both of those are true at once. My parents sold a piece of land they'd been holding onto for retirement to cover what the house couldn't absorb. They don't talk about it like a tragedy. They talk about it like weather that happened. The way you talk about a storm that took the roof but not the house. Renata and I are actually close again now, closer than we were before any of this. She asks me real questions about my life. I ask her real ones back. Last month she called just to tell me about a hike she'd gone on. No reason, no news, just because she wanted to talk to her sister, and I sat on my porch, a dry one. This time, nothing rotting on it, and just listened, and it was enough. I don't feel triumphant about any of it. I got proven right about a risk I flagged at dinner table over a year ago. And there is no version of being right about your family's financial collapse that feels like winning. What I feel now is quieter than that. Like someone who finally set the heavy box down and discovered her arms still worked fine without it. If there's a lesson in this, and I've turned it over enough now to trust it, it's this. Being the steady one in a family doesn't mean you don't need to be asked how you're carrying it. And loving someone enough to bet everything on their dream doesn't excuse you from asking the harder questions before you do. The two aren't opposites, they're supposed to travel together. My parents loved Renata enough to risk everything, and they loved me enough to assume I'd be fine. And it took an entire company collapsing for all of us to understand that both of those instincts, unchecked, can quietly wreck the people they're aimed at. My mother still keeps a photo from Renata's launch party on the hallway table, the two of them glowing under string lights. She added a second frame last Christmas, one from a hike Renata and I took together in the spring. Small thing. Nobody made a speech about it. It's just there now on the same table, the same height. Side by side. If this one hit close to home, tell me in the comments who in your family gets handed the heavy box without ever being asked if they can carry it. And if you want more stories like this, slow ones, honest ones, the kind you sit with after the video ends, go ahead and subscribe. I've got more to tell you.